How the actual fuck do I describe last week? Hello there, everybody. Sabai928 and I'm Aaron. Welcome back to DS Irae, interview with Kaziklu Bey. And the only way I can, well, realistically, I think the only way I can probably describe what the hell happened last week, because even now, I still have no idea what the fuck's going on. I mean, there is an idea in my head, but I don't think it's gonna actually be turning out that way. We had a somewhat happy moment with, Bey and, you know, Claudia, and then she licked him. Specifically his blood. Vampiric much? Yeah. Whoa, hello. Methuselah. I bid you welcome, Methuselah, so we did meet again. What? The person said that to me with nothing but a sense of hospitality in his mannerisms. And of course, because this is frickin' Mercurius related, my computer's going crazy! No, he wasn't speaking to me, but the person dwelling within me. I was merely seeing glimpses of his memories.
200年と少しぶりか、水銀。今はカリオストロというのだ。どうも宮中で派手に遊んだそうではないか。あのサンジェルマンというのもお前だろう。以前のホーエンハイムもそうだった。無駄に目立つのが好きらしい。年がいもなく属性をかき回したがる癖でもあるの。まあおかげで私はお前を探すのに苦労しなかったわけなのだ。
This was a dream I saw not through my own, Claudia Jerusalem's eyes, but through his. There are some things that I expect. This is not one of them. It was a dream about wandering the world for far too many years to count. I'd been seeing them this whole week, and this was yet another one.
癖かと言われれば確かにそうだな。説明すると長くなるが、私はあらゆる局面において物事を試さずに折れないのだ。御身との関係もその一環だ。私の投じた一石により、そちらの選択が未知なる景色を描いてくれれば良いと願う。ゆえに、さあメトシェラよ。私を探していたという理由を聞かせてもらいたい。
He'd been told what kind of being he was, became aware that he would travel the world until it ended, and that it would happen sooner than later. Because of that, he sought a meaning to life, something he could proudly point at as the worth of his existence, so he would be blessed with the satisfaction that came alongside it. In that way, he was much like me.
極めて簡単なことだ。私は私が欲する夢の形を見出した。お前の元を訪れたのはその報告と若干の協力を願うためだ。水銀。長く長く生きてきたが、私は魔術らしき魔術に疎いのでな。大それたものは必要ないのだ。些細な取り回しに関する知識だけを賜りたい。
ほう。つまり御身は私に教えを請いに来た。何のために？
He was seeking something else, and magic was but a means to an end for him. In other words, magic was absolutely necessary for him to fulfill his desire. But what was it? What kind of salvation did he seek? The answer was very concise and simple.
伴侶だよ。私はつがいを求めている。すなわち、対の存在が欲しいのだ。このまま終わりの時までたった一人、何とも交われずに去っていくのは耐えられない。私は彼女のためにあったのだと。確信することで救われたいし、救いたい。闇は単体である限り意味をなさず、虚無に過ぎない。光があってこそ 闇は闇として成立できる。
Oh.
そして逆もまた真になる。
その通り。私は光の御子をもとに欲しい。それと添い遂げることで生涯に意義を得る。この身は苦音の長きにわたり、ただ一人の闇だ。よって私のつがいとなるのは、月のごとき儚い光ではありえぬ。清烈で正常で命の惨禍をまばゆく体現する無休の太陽。闇を知り私を許し、されど絶対的に昇華する輝きの魂たるもの。それこそ我が伴侶にふさわしい。
And thus, like a saint sending out a prayer, he'd swore to find such an entity.
であれば御身、私に探索を手伝ってほしいのか。
いいえ、そうした必要は求めていない。言っただろう。光と闇をつなぐ因果は強固で深く、自然摂理の相関だと。故に私が自覚を持って動く以上、自然に引き合い出会うはずだ。そこに疑いは持っていない。私がお前に求めるものは、伴侶を延命させる手段である。
Oh my god. Those words made me gasp. Could he have been him? In that case, the light he spoke of could be...
なぜなら、私の願いは伴侶と出会うことではない。伴侶と終わりの日まで添い遂げることだ。世界はもうすぐ死ぬという。それは実際にそうなのだろう。だが、我々の尺度で語る長短に、人の時間感覚を当てはめるのは正しくあるまい。あと少し、もうわずか。そう言ってから1000年持つことすら当たり前に予想できる。事実先の階段から早200年を経ているのだから。人間ならば3度は死んでいる計算だろう。
確かに御身の願い理解した。魔術を知りたいのはそのためか。
Yep, this is obviously the last thing that I ever would have expected, if I can be perfectly honest.
メトシェラ殿は存在それ自体が神秘の塊と言ってよいゆえ、むしろ基礎を知らぬのだ。鳥が空を飛ぶための手段と努力を下せぬのと同じ。
At least the music conveys how fucked this is.
己がごく自然に長命であるからこそ、短命に生まれついた者がどのようにして延命するのかわからんと。
そういうことだ。して、いかに。
I was curious about the answer, but I didn't want to hear it. I felt like knowing it would take me past the point of no return. My instincts told me that I would then learn the truth behind the abnormality in me.
私から享受することは何もない。御身は知っているはずだ。初めて会った時のことをお忘れか。あの時こう言っていただろう。近く感じる概念を知り、真似事を試みたことも過去にあると。もう一度それをやればよい。
For example, the blood-sucking lowly creatures spewing ground-dwelling Natsira. Those who were buried too early, moving cadavers and the like. Oh, but there was only one thing that could have referred to.
私に再びまがいものの皮をかぶれとお前は言うのか。
おいては子に従えとも言うだろう。 闇の神聖たる恩義をもとに生まれた二次創作のごとき幻想だが、そうバカにしたものでもない。彼らはメトシェラの子供なのだ。そしてだからこそ私などから生病法を授かるよりは無理もないはず。不快であろうし窮屈でもあろうがね。しかしそれが一番マシだ。何も最後まで被る必要はどこにもあるまい。伴侶たるものを変えてしまえばすでに用なし。よくできた子だったとねぎらいの一つでもかけた後に脱ぎ捨てればよいだろう。
Jeez. The conversation made my throat feel maddeningly dry. A certain thing I wished to drink came to mind, and I thought I'd go insane. My neck was hot and it throbbed violently. Therein lied the answer. I unwittingly scratched it before tearing off the bandages covering it. Shit! My exposed neck had an inflamed, messy wound on it. It looked akin to a bite from a beast. In a way, it felt indecent, and it was the proof that fangs had pierced into me. It pulsated and wriggled like a second heart. Why did it take me so long to notice such an abnormality? Because I didn't want to worry him? Because he would have gotten mad at me? Or was it because I didn't think it was serious? No, I definitely knew it, but even so, I kept it hidden. I was in one right now. I always awaited their arrival and was even averse to waking up. Secretly, but with certainty, I'd accepted the changes and anticipated the future that awaited beyond them. For whatever reason, I believed the swelling feelings and uncontrollable torrents of emotion would definitely lead me to my sanctuary. And if this was the result of that, then, dear lord, what a sinful creature I'd become. Giving you a heads up, by the way, I know this is probably coming out of nowhere, but the power's been kind of going out every now and then, so just to be safe, I'm just going to, like I said, the power has been going, well, kind of haywire because we've got a storm going on, I'm sorry. I ran and dashed to escape the embarrassment, but I knew that I was actually heading for something as well. I was being called. I could hear a voice beckoning me closer. Before me, I saw nothing but a boundless, profound, pure dark, and I felt like I was flying into its arms.
いいだろう。それが最も理にかなっているなら嫌はない。愛する者のためならば、汚れも私はいとわねさ。
いや、やはり似た者同士だと思ってね。私もつい先日だが。私の女神を見出したのだよ。彼女のために全てを捧げると誓ったのさ。求める結末は少々恩義と違うがね。まあ些細なことだ。ともかく応援させてもらおう。さあこれを祝いの品だ。近く現れるだろうメトシェラの花嫁へと。
I couldn't tell what it was that he gave me.
受け取るがよ。人に会うと私は信じる。
そうだな。ああ、その通りだと。
However, I clearly understood that it had something to do with me.
核のごとし、聖なる光に私は会いたい。
I shouted, denying it with all I was, but it didn't even feel like the words I was saying were my own. The pulsations around my neck were dragging me into the dark. I merely loved the light, wanted to touch it and perhaps even grant it. That was all there was to it. I pled for him to return to me what I was. Yet the answer to that materialized itself as dark wings that embraced the entirety of my being. Even the subtle pain running in my neck. Shit. I slowly disappeared into the whirling torrent of darkness. It was deep, profound, and endless, much like the aeons he'd walked.
マジであのバカどこ行きやがった
I completely lost sight of Claudia and was pretty much at a loss. But then I finally realized something obvious. The places she would go to in the town were limited. As long as she didn't just lose her mind and start running around blindly, then she'd probably stick to places she knew. Hell, even if she did go nuts, she'd pick her destination subconsciously. There's only one place that came to mind. I turned around and began running straight to the cathedral. It wasn't even 3 minutes away from me, so I figured I'd catch her in no time. What really mattered was what came after that. I had to focus on what I'd do after I found her. Specifically, I had to figure out the one thing that I actually wanted to do and then give my all. After briefly thinking it through, I came upon one thing.
てめえは聖女なんかじゃねえそんなもんにはならせね
What circumstances and thoughts made her go for my blood didn't matter to me one bit. That wasn't the first thing I had to care about. Thing is, she'd run away because she thought that it was shameful. Clearing up that misunderstanding was way more important. After all, if there was one thing I knew well since I was a brat.
え人間なんてのは汚ねえんだクソみてえな生き物なんだそしてお前もそんなもんだ
Claudia had stopped acting so fucking innocent. She was basically the apex of bothersome virgins. Why the fuck would anyone get flustered about a piece of shit doing something shitty? She did say something about not seeing herself as a big deal, but the sentiment clearly wasn't strong enough. She's still bothered by appearances and all that crap.
だからあの程度で焦るんだよ思い上がるな
I wouldn't be disappointed if she showed me her dirtiest, most sinful sides. Fuck, if she really wanted to teach me love, then...
お高く止まってんじゃね
I had to tell her that no matter what. Mustering my determination, I arrived at the cathedral and kicked the door
え
open.
クラウディ
However, what I saw there was... SHIT! There were two intertwining silhouettes before the altar. One of them was Claudia staring blankly into space with dull eyes and a slightly twitching chin. The other was Ludwig embracing and practically falling into her while burying his face in her neck. What the fuck was he doing to her? The scene was so simple and obvious that I actually found it hard to understand. I stood in place as Claudia's body lightly shook. A droplet of blood leaked out of her neck and fell to the floor. It took only a moment, but it felt like an eternity. Get him! He slowly raised his face and looked me in the eye.
なんだお前今頃になりやってきた
He grinned, giving me a glimpse of his bloody fangs.
遅かった彼女はもはや私のもの
Kill him. At that moment, my limited self-restraint was shattered into dust. A bestial roar imbued with magical power. It was strong enough to shatter the cathedral's interior and form a brief storm of broken flooring and pews. I had never snapped this badly. I jumped at supersonic speeds and closed in on the shithead while making my way through the shattered stained glass flying all around. Then I raised my fist and threw it toward his mug. But instead of getting the expected feel of his face, it felt like I just punched mist. It was the same as it was back in Kachin. And like 3 days ago, my attack didn't work. Not only that, I was also subjected to and blown away by some power I didn't understand. The wounds that were close to healing opened up again. Feeling as if my body was being torn apart, I looked at him through distorted vision.
身の程を知れよ出来損ないお前の牙などそんなものだ子が親にまがいものが本物にそしてノアの子孫がメトシェラに勝てる道理もないだろうもとよりお前のごとき若造は全く問題にしていない
I feel unimaginable hatred towards you, good sir.
所詮私を間違った形で信仰している無様な贋作ではないか
With Claudia in his hand, Ludwig rose to the air. His cloak spread out like wings and melted into the dark in a way that I couldn't even see where it began. His own face and hands, too, took on the color of darkness. He and it became one the same. Surrounding dark was him, much like a limb. Reminded me of a certain concept.
駆動の想像
Someone like that, though, at an absurdly large scale. As I gazed at him floating in the air, felt like I was just seeing a humanoid shape on an extremely huge giant. In fact, even that comparison was far too weak.
なんだそれは。お前たちの陳腐な理屈で私を測るのはいい加減にやめてもらおう。闇は闇、そこにある。開脈から存在する世界の裏で、それが私だ。故に
The man claiming to be the Dark slowly rose up and pointed at me.
せめてお前が求めた夜の技を見せてやろう。クラウディアを私に引き合わせてくれた例もある。
But I'm gonna shreds whatever. Time to.
核を知れば、二度とその鮮魚な夢で世界を汚すこともあるまい。
Suddenly, a torrent of black blood burst out from each and every wound on my body. I couldn't tell what he did or what happened to me. However, I could clearly feel the dark gift begin to fade. Helga was screaming too. All the magic blood that made Wilhelm Ehrenberg into Kaziklu Bey was being squeezed out by the hands of darkness.
知れよ、吸血鬼など幻想に過ぎぬ。
Felt as if my desire, ideal pride, and conviction was being crushed along with it.
お前は人だ。人として生き、死ぬがいい。世界が終わる日も近い。
He turned around, clad in the whirling darkness.
待て
Couldn't just let the fucker go! I extended my hand but couldn't reach, raised my voice but barely made a sound. Felt my craving. Thought I was, leave my body with my blood.
さらばだ。
He gave me one last look before breaking through the cathedral ceiling. I looked up as my consciousness faded away. I was left all alone under the sky. Not even the light of the moon could reach me.
さて、共に行こうか、クラウディア。我々二人だけの天地へ。
I don't like you at all. Ludwig whispered those words while showing great consideration for the unconscious girl in his arms. His expression and tone were fatherly, making it hard to believe he was acting cold toward Wilhelm mere moments ago. And again, perhaps this was his true self. Whatever the case, it quickly changed again. He furrowed his brow for a moment before forming a cynical wry
と
grin.
はいえ、そうだ。筋を通しておく必要は確かにある。面倒なことはごめんだが、そのためにも釘を刺しておかねばなるまい。
Well, shit! He turned his head and began flying toward a certain place. His speed wasn't particularly great, most likely because he was being considerate of Claudia. Even if he wasn't fast, however, there was an extremely great abnormality going on around him. As Ludwig flew, the world's night moved along with him. There wasn't a problem with the movement and placement of celestial bodies. Much more absurd and terrifying, the shadowy regions themselves becoming akin to animals. Company. No, that expression wasn't appropriate. After all, he was the darkness, the lord who dominated half of the world. Even then, that idea only applied when you conformed to the concepts of day and night. Naturally, darkness could be born anywhere. Even when there was sunlight or artificial lighting, anywhere where the light was blocked would become the domain of Methuselah. Caverns, dense woods, the sides of buildings, even the shadows cast by animals, humans included, were no exception. Therefore, the extraordinarily vast black kingdom that began moving was actually all a part of Ludwig's body. He was a descendant of God, the personification of an aspect of nature, born through people's worship of the dark in the long-gone age of mythology. He was a divinity, who bore some of the weight of the current law, one who existed to keep the world running as it was. There were many of his kind in the past, but as the origin began to die, the arcane weakened, making them return to nature. As such, he was the only one left. He'd become Methuselah, and still possessed a will because he was most akin to the one god, as unyielding as his parent. If Ludwig were to purposefully unleash his immense power and move as he pleased, the effect of that would be obvious. All the darkness would be torn away from the regions where it was far too early for morning to come. They would become an emptiness, where neither light nor shadow reigned, and then... Due to that fact, the world would crumble if he could merely let go of all restraint and traveled around the globe. Of course, he had no intention of doing so, but there was no denying that he was an entity capable of such destruction. Irae. And so he arrived at his destination, wielding the might of his dark divinity. He looked down upon Vetisburg and spoke with a booming voice. Vetisburg. Oops, let's fix that. Wait. That's not what I wanted to do. Ludwig's voice was hot. Though Ludwig's voice was haughty, he held Claudia tenderly and sincerely. He flaunted his duality as if it was the proof that he had acquired the light he so craved. Oh, are you actually going to try and fight us? He was Methuselah. His very existence was an ancient miracle that surpassed even magic. His breath, gaze, and even words bore arcane powers that upset modern common sense. The fact that the king's voice reached the squirming darkness that was his dominion was the ultimate proof of that fact. He could be heard not just by Karl Kraft, but the other claws and fangs of the obsidian table, as well as everyone else within the night. Fully aware of that, he solemnly continued. A moment later, half of the world felt the pressure of the densified darkness. People feared the dark, being born with diurnal instincts. If they saw places light couldn't reach as otherworldly. Even those such as Wilhelm, who adored the night, weren't any different at their core. They revered it exactly because it was fearful and tried to gain its power by extolling it. Wandering through just a single night's worth of darkness was deeply disturbing. That was both a truth and a law. And yes, even a single night was enough. Ludwig, however, was the oldest entity in the known world, one who had lived for aeons. Thousands, millions. He was a being made from years of dark nights, so countless they seemed infinite. It was only obvious what would happen to the comparably short-lived creatures of the Obsidian Round Table if they touched but a fraction of Methuselah. The abyss would be so hard to bear that it would shatter their mortal minds. Ludwig's downright divine pressure made half of the world focused around Europe turn to abject panic. How are my viewers in Europe doing, by the way? I hope y'all are doing okay. Numerous people committed suicide or went insane. Those engulfed by the surge of darkness saw nightmares that would plague them and their children for years to come. It spawned art that was said to cause madness upon merely seeing, hearing, or read it, while many of the fetuses still cradled within wombs were turned into albinos. Children. It was a moment when everyone was shaken by the darkness of Methuselah. There were only two exceptions.
最後の神秘か。なるほど。相変わらず無縁だぞカール。要はこれこそ K の意図したものであろう。
Reinhard Heydrich. He sat on his throne, chuckling in mild amusement, a joyous expression on his face.
否定はせぬが、さていかがする？もしやお気に召さぬかな？
It'll be a fun distraction. Karl Kraft. He bent his mouth in jest, swaying in a mercurial manner. The dark pressure didn't scare the two one bit. Though the former expressed it lovingly and the latter with clarity, it filled them both with amusement and lament. They acknowledged Ludwig's powers and thanked him for it, but they sought a phenomenon completely detached from that concept.
まだ基地が晴れん。あなたもだろう、黄金よ。怒りの日は依然と故に当たり前といえば当たり前だが、相応に手間をかけた点を鑑みれば落胆を禁じ得ない。
Don't worry. You'll get your day of wrath in, Amantes and Mentes. You'll be fine, don't worry. It's totally wicked, I swear.
羨ましいな、目通しない。お前は満足したという。
Fucking excuse me, green is my color.
であれば。
The gold momentarily paused and looked up at the emptiness above, as if to peek through the castle ceiling and look directly at Ludwig.
こちらの満足にも付き合ってもらおう。我々にしてやれることは何もないと言っていたが、そんなことはあるまい。なあ、オンミ、メトシェル殿よ。
Wettisburg suddenly began to shake. The Legion within accepted their master's will and raised a war cry. Seek hail, seek hail, grant us victory, seek hail, Victoria.
私はそれを壊したことがあるのだろう。ああ、知りたい。試してみよう。
His love was destruction. His overflowing hegemony, charisma, made the castle take its true form. Yes! That was all the reaction Ludwig gave in response. A mere breath. There was a hint of admiration, shock, and disgust in it, so it wasn't like it didn't make him feel anything. In fact, he was surprised, but his reaction was abnormal nonetheless.
それがお前か、ハイドリ。まったく罪深い男だな。水銀の夢につながるという舞台道具。なるほど。確かになかなかの役者だよ。
What appeared was a skeleton the size of a mountain. The way it showed only its upper half and supported itself with its arms made it look like an undead that had just crawled out of the realm of the deceased. And of course, it's plated in most luxuriously fantastic gold. What a... Oh, wait. Comparison couldn't be more fitting. The skeleton had appeared after Wellisburg swelled up, and it was comprised of millions of souls. In a sense, this was hell. It is an army of those who'd perished in war, a palace of strife where they'd kill each other for ages to come. Gladtime was definitely a hell, and this was but one of its forms. It was war, repulsive, fearful, but shining with the brilliance of gold. Some may call it a manifestation of humanity's malignancy. Not even a dependent of God was capable of handling it with these. After all, they were almost the same. Therefore, there was something abnormal about Ludwig's ability to maintain his refinement and aloofness when faced with this hell. Perhaps it was his pride as Methuselah, but he even felt a hint of pity toward the enemy of the army of war demons. Hyperbeam? He kept his composure even as the skeleton's large palate opened up and began gathering more heat than a nuclear bomb.
やめろ。私 私は言ったはずだぞ。邪魔はせんから邪魔をするな。
I don't think you seem to understand here. You seem to be the only person that's actually come forth with a hint of power. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this, whether you don't want to participate or not.
戦いたければよそで好きなだけやればよかろう。いいな。
Nope, I want to fight. The moment the power was about to be unleashed, a voice thick with anticipation rang out from the core of Gladsheim. A rising howl of strife, the destructive surge of energy became a golden beam that could reduce a country to ashes. Even so, Ludwig remained unfazed, and because of that, the destruction didn't occur. Oh, of course, because he decided to hide and turn into a bunch of darkness. Cool. As though he were an all-consuming star of darkness, the light penetrated him and disappeared. No, that was wrong. Oh! A moment later, accompanied by a heaven-shaking sound, Gladsheim's frame was shot into the air. It was caused by its own attack, coming back to it through the shadows beneath. All darkness and shade were akin to Ludwig's palms. There was nothing surprising about what had occurred. To him, it was literally as simple as breathing. It was the equivalent of inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. Nope, if anything, you just basically convinced us that we want to fight you. You really should not have done that. Ludwig looked down on Gladsheim, which had collapsed due to its own attack. Oof, looking down on Gladsheim. Oof. I guess that could be considered a bit of an insult toward Gladsheim. I wonder how Eleanor and Sammy. Oh yeah, I'm wondering how Eleanor and our good boy Schreiber is going to feel about that. He knew full well that it was much like a test of each other's power, and that the hell hadn't lost a single soul yet. It didn't bother him whatsoever. I don't think that matters, buddy. Your interests don't matter. You're going against incarnations of war. Anyway, feel free to continue. He turned around and left, dragging his darkness with him. With no hesitation, he headed for the north, the land of his ideal. Bad? Despite his enemy getting the better of him, Reinhardt's visage didn't display a single hint of anger. In fact, he felt the opposite. It gave him great joy, and he found Ludwig worthy of his praise. Therefore, his next course of action was obvious. The words came from his very core. He honestly believed that love was destruction and that war, the clash of destructive powers, was the true supreme heaven. That value system of his was unshakable until it expanded with each new opposing ideal he consumed. That was exactly what made him a hegemony. Is this referring to our tea time at 11? I'm pretty sure that should be able to hold off for right now. We'll be done with this by about 10 o'clock. We'll be fine. If they were to fight Ludwig again, there was something that simply had to be done beforehand. Reinhardt nodded, fully understanding what he meant. The lead actor. Interview with Kaziklu Bey. Yep, I'm still in the church right now. Just saying. Oh god. Oh god. Okay, that kind of fucking hurt. I felt a drop all on my cold body. With just that, all my organs that were about to stop working suddenly revived, and my blood gained enough vigor to storm through my veins again. There was a downright explosive feeling of resurrection. I quickly raised my body up from the floor. Oh!
気がつきましたか。
The first thing I saw was Beatrice. I was still in the cathedral, just as I remembered, and this woman was looking at me with evident displeasure in her expression.
なんててめえが。
ここにいるのかと？そんなの大きなお世話です。私も好きで来たんじゃありません。本音を言えば、あなたが死ねば嬉しいくらいにこっちは思っていますからね。
Well, she was basically the same as usual, no charm at all. But at the very least, thanks to her, my head began working well enough for me to understand the situation.
そうかよ。まあ世話になったみてえだな。
A little bit, maybe. From what I could tell, she gave me some blood. It was enough to save my ass moments before I withered away. Same went for Helga. She was weaker but not gone yet, meaning that I could still do my thing.
やめてください。言ったでしょ。好きでやったことじゃないと。
Well, just because it might piss you off, I'm gonna thank ya.
単なる命令。それ以上でも以下でもない。
嘘だな。
I said that because I more or less understood the situation. Though she was an idiot, she wasn't just some pawn ready to act out someone else's will.
お前はたとえハイドリ秘境の命令だろうが、気に食わなければぶっちぎるやつだろ。つまんねえ演技してんじゃねえよ。
Kinda shows that you do know her. She probably just tell him that she came here, but she was too late to save me. Beatrice wasn't lying when she said she wanted me dead, but something got her to save me regardless. However, I had no idea what.
どういうことだ。
In response, Beatrice looked away and didn't give me a direct answer.
あなたのそれ、ルートビヒにやられたのでしょ。彼、ハイドリ秘境に喧嘩を売りましたよ。追撃命令が出ています。率直にどう思いますか？
Hearing that somewhat surprised me, but a part of me could more or less understand it. He seemed like the guy who'd do that. Even so, there was only one thing I could say in response.
バカな野郎だ。
ええ、バカなやつです。彼がまともじゃないというのは分かったし、あなたを手玉に取るほどの力もある。実際、私たちとは違う域の人なのかもしれません。でも甘いですよ、分かってない。ハイドリ秘境はそういう次元じゃないんだって、黒煙卓の全員が知っている。
He is a bit of a fool for challenging Hydric, I will say that.
まして今回は、副資料閣下までもが乗り気になっているんです。考えてみてください。あの二人ですよ。あの二人まで彼は敵に回したんですよ。なんてバカなこと。ありえない。
Her voice gradually began to shake until it became much like a shocked chuckle.
終わりですよ。もう絶対に助かりません。彼がたとえ何者だろうと、これは自殺行為としか言えないでしょうね。
Yep. As I silently but thoroughly agreed with her, Beatrice grabbed me by my chest. This time she roared with intensity.
だけどそれでも、それほど愚かな真似をしてでも、彼はクラウディアを欲したのでしょう。見積もりが甘い、自分の力を過信している。もしかしたらもう勝った気になっているのかもしれないし、そこはわからない。けれど、彼はクラウディアを渡さないでしょう。遠からず、ハイドリ秘境がどれほどのものだったかを痛感し、己の迂闊さを知るのは必然。ですが、絶望だけはきっとしない。彼女のために彼は戦い抜くでしょう。それだけはわかる。
She then looked at me with anger burning in her damp eyes.
あなたはどうなんですか、ビルヘルム・エーレンブルグ。クラウディアはあなたこそ生涯最後に光を与えてくれる相手だと定めたんじゃないんですか。
The words she'd hit me with left me slightly surprised.
お前知ってやがったのか。
ええ。さっき少佐から聞きました。
Claudia didn't have much time left. Beatrice had only come to me because she became aware of that fact. Even if she didn't like the order or want to save me, she chose this path because it's best for Claudia. She then let go of my clothes and continued.
私は今でもあなたたちの関係が許せないし、あの子に死んでほしくない。でもそれは人間をやめてまで長生きしろという意味じゃないです。そんなバカは私たちだけでもうたくさん。
So she wanted her to die normally? That question of mine appeared on my face and she responded by forming a faint smile and nodding.
クラウディアが自ら選んだ道の結果として病があるなら取り上げちゃいけないように思うんです。そんなの彼女の人生に対する否定も同じ。少なくとも吸血鬼になってまで生きながらえたいなんてことあの
No.
子は思わないし願わないはずだから。
No, she would just feel absolute shit. She wouldn't be able to actually enjoy the light that she so desperately loved.
あなたは責任持ってクラウディアを救わないといけません。
If her life couldn't be saved, she could at least have a happy death. The peace that would take her to the sanctuary she so sought and prayed for. That was basically what Beatrice wanted to
で
say.
も正直言うとわからない。みんな私の勝手な思い込みだし別の見方もきっとある。たとえ嫌われても憎まれてもどんなに泣き叫ばれようとも断固死なせないと手を尽くすことだってそれは否定できない愛でしょう。なのでこれはあまり当てにならない私個人の女としての意見ですが、共に自分を欲してくれる男性が2人いてその間で揺れているとき選ぶ決め手になるものがあるとすれば多分。
Slightly curious, I waited for her to continue, but she seemingly couldn't put the words together and...
もういいか。取り込み中のところ悪いがね。あいにく時間が押している。
Oh, sup, how you doing? I'm slightly less dead than earlier.
具にもつかん話なら、そこらでいい加減に切り上げろ。
少佐
Samuel was leaning against the open door and knocked on it while some good shit's playing, while not hiding a bit of her irritation.
まったく。
Yes. Give me the good shit. Give me the good shit. Yes. This really had become an all-out war. It was originally just Maya and Claudia's prom had somehow blown up into something huge.
ああ、確かにしょうもねえ話だったわ。待たせて悪いな。ほんじゃ行こうか。
あなたほんとしまいにはぶっ殺しますよ。大体さっきからいまいち覇気が見えないというかそういうところが心配でやる気ちゃんとあるんでしょうね。
I'm fucking Kaziklu Bey!
当たり前だ、このボケナス。
Which is basically the same answer, only 100 times better. It's like Samuel had warned, no matter who we fought, we had to achieve an absolute victory. Not to mention that I already knew what I had to do, and I wouldn't waver on that no matter what.
クラウディアは俺のもんだ。俺が拾ったやつなんだから。俺が取り返しに行くんだよ。
Goddamn right. Her fate was to become a great rose that would shine brilliantly as she perished within the light I'd grant her. Angel and the Rosenkranz. Following a dream that felt both long and fleeting, I regained my consciousness.
お目覚めかね、クラウディ
I looked up and saw his face. It was a visage so dark it seemed as though he was melting into the night sky, and it was so unnatural that I instantly knew race played no part. The whites of his eyes were painted crimson, while his pupils, on the other hand, looked whitened. Neither of these qualities were a normal human could possibly possess. You have not seen what people will do to their eyes, lady. Frankly, it was an appearance that would make any ordinary person scream, but
怖がらないのだね、私のこと。
ええ、あなたにそういう気持ちは感じません。
It wasn't because I was half a person, but because I could understand that he was being considerate of me. The gentleness in his eyes, as well as the warmth and softness of his arms, was more than enough proof of that. He was also carrying me as he flew through the sky, but not even that evoked fear in me. We were above a sea of clouds, yet I didn't worry about falling down whatsoever. I couldn't describe it well, but it almost felt like I was riding a large carriage, or perhaps a castle. No matter how high the floor they were in, as long as they were indoors, most weren't afraid of the height. And the sensation I felt was somewhat similar.
ではクラウディア、私に問いたいことはあるかね。答えられるものならば、何であろうと答えるよ。
That was another reason why I didn't feel any fear. My head was far too preoccupied with questions. He was aware of that and said those words because he was considerate of me. With that in mind, I didn't hesitate to present my first inquiry to him.
ルイ、あなたは一体誰なのですか？ルートビヒ・バン・ローゼンクランツという人物は。
本物のという意味ならば、あのカチンで死んでいる。
Oh! I half expected this answer, and it began the unveiling of his true self.
私はあそこで長いこと眠っていたのだ。正確に言えば200年程度だがね。君らの感覚で測るなら長いと表現して問題あるまい。実際私としてもそこまで睡眠するつもりはなかった。何せかなり久しぶりに眠ったのでね。この皮をかぶるにあたり、まずは形から入ってみようとしたわけだが、どうもなりきりが過ぎたようだ。目覚めの時に君と会うことができたのだから。
A smile appeared on his dark face. He basically just revealed that he was the anomaly at Kachin that Wilhelm and the others had talked about.
時代ごと、その時生きている人間から名や立場を拝借するのは古い友人から教わった処世術だ。私は寝室に踏み入ってきたルートビヒなる人物を殺し、彼の経歴をいただいたのだよ。
Oh, I see.
じゃあ、あなたの本名は？
ない。ただ、九段の友人はメトシェラと呼んでいるし、私もそれを許している。そして今は、ルイという名が気に入っているね。君がつけてくれたものだから、今後はそう名乗るし、呼んでほしい。
He spoke as though he'd been granted a great treasure. This man bore the name Methuselah and had slept for 2 centuries. However, I was sure he was alive for dozens of times longer than
あ
that.
なたの正体は？
Louis was momentarily surprised, but his expression quickly became one of understanding.
なるほど。一種の血命というやつか。血の交換をするにあたり、私の記憶が君に流れていたわけだね。気恥ずかしいが、ここは手間が省けたと考えよう。ああ、その通りだよ。私はそういうものらしい。
そして自分の子供である吸血鬼の真似事をした。
しかり必要なことだったのでね。君を死なせないためには。
He lived for what some would call an eternity, and had now sought a soulmate to be his opposite in this life cycle. But even if he had found the right person, they couldn't live as long as he did, so it was necessary for him to bestow them a means of prolonging life. With this, it was proven that the dreams were real, and it now made perfect sense.
お願いだから、どうして自分がなどと言わないでくれよ。私の記憶を垣間見たなら、おおよそ理解はしているはずだ。 私にとって君は無二の
光だったと。
そうだ。あのカチンで君の魂に私は触れた。故に目覚めた。吸血鬼としての皮をかぶっていたからね。その外装を瞬時に無力化されては飛び起きざるを得んよ。そしてそんな真似ができるものは光以外にありえない。黒煙卓の連中は状況を不思議がっていたようだが、真相は何のこともない。君が視覚者だったというだけさ。
Back then, the ones within his darkness were Lisa, Beatrice, Wilhelm, myself, and the true Ludwig. According to Louis, upon seeing the light, he'd killed Ludwig, who was separate from the rest and became him. That can only mean that Ludwig was the mysterious corpse in the coffin. Louis had also said that he'd taken the man's personal history. That was sure that it didn't mean he was merely acting as him. Louis had perfect knowledge of the modern age, which was proof that he'd robbed Ludwig's whole existence from him. Vampires are fully capable of that, so their origin, the primordial god, ancestor of the dark, could do it with ease. I knew it well, as I had experienced the miracles and gifts that the magic of blood could bestow firsthand.
それでも君はなぜ自分が選ばれたのか不思議かね。
いいえ、そこはこの際問いません。
As incomprehensible as his over-evaluation of me was, I had other questions on my mind. For example, I also didn't know the details of how I banished the darkness back at the cave. Still, there was something else I wanted to know more than all else. It was perhaps my most immediate concern.
私は吸血鬼になるのですか？
That was more important than anything else. My simple question received an answer just as concise.
そうだ。
He nodded and looked at me with certainty in his eyes, as though it was already determined.
だったら私はあなたの伴侶じゃなく奴隷です。だって吸血鬼の親子とはそういう関係なのでしょ？おとぎ話のような幻想だけど、あなたはその皮をかぶってらしく振る舞ったわけなんだから。つまり私もそういうものになってしまう。
That makes sense. Huh.
なら私の意志は一体どこに？あなたに操られるだけなのですか？
Would I become like those poor undead back at Kachin? I asked him that, and he responded by shaking his head.
違うよ。私は君を縛ったりなどしていないし、むしろ逆だ。解き放っているつもりだよ。なぜなら、吸血鬼とそのなりかけは、自分の感情や欲望を制御することが難しくなる。特に後者は顕著でね。故にこの数日間、君がこれまでと違う状態だったのは事実だが、別に操られていたわけではないし、人格が変わったわけでもない。ただ、普段より数割増しで素直になっていただけだ。
That kind of is a bit of a personality change, sort of? I think? The meager joy, anger, embarrassment, numerous other impulses. He claimed that all the feelings I suppressed and couldn't even be aware of had begun to get a strong reaction out of me.
だから解放？
そうだよ。それは君の言う半分じゃなくなるということではないだろうか。戸惑いはしただろうし、後悔もしただろう。はしたないと感じることさえ、もしかしたらあったのかもしれない。だが、それこそ君の求めていたものではないかね。制御できぬ思いの本流。振り回されることはあっても、 やりたくないことはやらないだろう。
That was the reason why I had a good impression of Louis and let my guard down to him. Why I got mad at Wilhelm for treating him roughly. And why I felt a craving for blood back then.
そうした意味で君の意志は君のものだ。私が操ったわけではない。吸血鬼にその手の主従関係があるのは否定せんがね。そんな命令は決して下さんし、そもそもできんよ。なぜなら君は光だから。それを前にあらゆる闇のものは無力となる。
だけど
There was a contradiction in his words. If he saw me as light, then why did he turn me into a creature as dark as a vampire? Both of us were now the inhabitants of the night.
いくら私を生かすためでも心を解放するためでも太陽の下を歩けなくなるなら意味なんかない。
Like I was stating, she loves doing that, even if it does hurt her.
あなたは私から光を奪ったのですか？答えて、レイ。
I lost dozens of years of my life exactly because I wasn't satisfied with the light. I couldn't have and sought it regardless. In that regard, if he wanted to prolong my life, it was true that keeping me away from the sun was a reasonable course of action, but I just couldn't agree to it.
だってそんなのは私じゃない。私の今までを否定している。あなたが光と定めたクラウディア・イエルザレムではなくなるんですよ。分かってるんですか？
もちろん100も承知だよ。言われるまでもないことだ。
His instantaneous answer left me dumbfounded. He lovingly watched my reaction before continuing the whisper.
白い夜、覚えていないか。この世界には光と闇が同居している地もあるんだよ。そして君もそれを見たいと言ってくれた。
With that, I remembered the ideal land he talked of.
そこでなら闇は光と共存できる。光もまた闇を宿して光のままに生きられる。私が君から奪うのは死という暗黒。それだけだよ。他には何も望まない。君は君のままであればいい。勝手な真似をしたのは認める。押し付けだと言われても否定はできん。故に愛してくれという気もないさ。ただ私は君を愛していると知ってもらうために死を奪った。そのことだけを理解してくれ。私から言える事実は以上が全てだよ、クラウディア。
He concluded as if anticipating the time we would spend until the end of days. I said nothing back to him. I couldn't find the words. It was true that by becoming his soulmate I would have all my wishes fulfilled, and I couldn't deny that he guided me to this. However, for some reason I felt an uncomfortable sensation in my heart. There was no fault in his confession, but a part of me was unable to accept it. Despite him making me more honest with myself, I actually didn't like something about the whole situation. Was there some feeling inside me that I wasn't aware of until I met him? What was it, though? I couldn't tell. I really failed to figure it out, and yet I couldn't ignore it either. I felt like I would be trying to figure it out for all eternity, but then...
まったく無粋な奴らだ。忠告はしたというのに。
They chasing ya, bitch. Louis was looking behind him. Once I followed his gaze, I finally realized what he was staring at.
あれは
Yes, the feeling tormenting my heart was...
しばし眠れクラウディア。目が覚めた時、そこには白い夜が広がっていると約束しよう。
待ってレイ、あなたは
Unable to finish my sentence, I sunk into him. Into the transient darkness that would lead me to the White Knight. I really hate So it looks like a real battle is about to get started, and that's gonna be fun as all fuck. So if you all like this, be sure to let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will definitely see all of you guys. I feel like we're getting toward an end, or the ending somehow. So we'll have to wait on that one. I'm sorry what this took, but thank you all so much for watching, and I will definitely see all of you guys in the next video.